Hi, welcome to the Book Bar, where everything book is on the menu.
I'm Anjanette Barr.
And I am Alex.
And today we are going to talk about gardening.
Yes, gardening and books and stuff like that.
Yep. So since I'm going to be talking about gardening books, I thought I would talk to you from my garden. And today is actually a collaboration with some other YouTubers, and you can find the links to their channels in the description below. They're all going to be talking about gardening and their kids, and I am as well going to go over children's books that I love, that have garden and botanical themes, but also I want to talk about adult books. So I'm going to put timestamps in the description as well. Start with adult books for those of you who don't have kiddos, and then move on to my favorite ways to get kids involved in the garden and use it as an educational opportunity, and the books to help them love gardening more. So I'm going to start though with books for grown-ups, and so if you don't know, I live in Juneau, Alaska, which obviously Pacific Northwest, but even a little bit further north than most everybody else in the states. And so so obviously it's colder here, and also I have kind of a weird microclimate. I don't know if you can hear. If you listen, you probably can't, but I can hear seagulls, and I can almost see a glacier. And so in my strange microclimate, I live in a temperate rainforest, so it's very wet, and so like weeds are almost impossible to keep at bay. But a lot of the things that would grow south don't grow here at all, or they take a really long time. So you can see my peas behind me. They grow really well here, but what are we at? We're almost to the end of July, and I barely have any peas yet. And most people, their peas have been long done before July. So let's see. Yeah, I've got a few growing, but I still have a lot of flowers, so they will continue for the rest of the summer to just thrive and be beautiful. And I have several other things behind me, but everything is kind of in still early blooming. This has also been kind of a colder summer. Right now I'm obviously wearing wool, and it's overcast, but definitely it has been wet this week. So all that to say, I have some specific gardening favorite books for this area, but my favorite books about gardening in general are two that I've already passed on, so I'm going to put the pictures up as I say them. The first is called The Backyard Homestead, and the other is the Urban Homestead. So both of these books are kind of a general overview of how you can have what I like to call a micro homestead in a small space. Here in Juneau, there are no big spaces. We were locked between the ocean and the mountains, and all the land that I'm on right now was glacier just not very long ago, so the soil's not very deep, which is a problem here. But more importantly for these books is that the lots are not very big. We actually have a fairly large piece of land here, and compared to where I grew up in the Midwest, it's still fairly small. So I love that these books give you an overview of not just gardening, but other things that you can do to live a more self-sufficient life, no matter how big or small your yard is. And they're both very approachable. And I think I read The Backyard Homestead first and really enjoyed it. I think I still lived in the Midwest at the time. I think it was a library book. And then I checked it out again, and then I ended up buying it, and then I ended up passing it along to somebody. And then the Urban Homestead I got when I moved to Juneau, hoping that there were some ideas for even indoor, or we had a tiny little deck when we first moved here. And I found that also very helpful, and it got me into chickens. Well, it was ducks first, and vermiculture and composting and some other things that you can do like in a small space. So I love it. Both of those are great family books that your whole family can flip through, so I highly recommend those. And then my other favorite books for grown-ups that I have here. First, this one, The Alchemy of Herbs. I really enjoy because it is full of recipes for things like garlic. There's a whole section that explains each herb. They're not all herbs, obviously. And then recipes for how to use them. So here's nettle. I love the big color pictures. It gives you all the important information about the properties, but then all the issues that that it can potentially help with. Like this has sections for healthy bones, teeth, and hair, women's health issues, and decreasing seasonal allergies, detoxing, reducing pain, and then it gives you the common amounts that you would use in various ways, and then it gives you recipes. So I like that it just goes herb by herb, plant by plant, the common things that grow in the U.S. and that you can grow in your yard or perhaps even in your home, because herbs are often great for growing in small spaces, and then it gives you a lot of inspiration for how to use these for health purposes. I took a class. I'll put the link in the description below because now I'm having a hard time remembering the name of the company. I took a class in herbalism with my children. It's a grown-up class, but I bought the materials and then I led the class with them so that I could tailor it to their level and also a few of their friends. And I learned how to make tinctures and salves and teas, and just kind of learned the various properties that plants can have. So it was kind of a crash course in botany and specifically medicinal purposes, but also things like beauty treatments and stuff, and bath salts, relaxation, things like that. So that was really fun. And then when I picked this book up, it felt like a really good companion to sit on my shelf. So I highly recommend this one. And this is widely available. I think I may have gotten it at Costco or on Amazon. And then the other one that is very popular that's along the same lines is the Boreal Herbal. And this is good for anyone who lives in the Pacific Northwest or who lives in a boreal forest. And this is for growing, but also foraging, just how to harvest various things, how to use what is commonly around us in a sustainable way, and then what to do with it. So you can see rose hips here, blueberries, this is fireweed here. So I really like this for our area, and it's very common. It has things like Yukon birch syrup recipes, and like Saskatoon berries and salmon berries. It has berries, herbs. What else is another section? And then it has a getting started section with all the things that you would want to gather, trees, and recipes like spruce tip jelly. So that was the first one I made from this. We have spruce trees in our yard and all over Juneau, and it's really good to know how not to over harvest, and it touches on that with these, and then gives you lots of recipe. Oh, there's dandelion stuck to this page because I made dandelion jelly, which is another favorite. So anyway, this is a great book if you live anywhere near me, and I did get this one at Costco, I know. It's gorgeous, and and it gives a little map here of where it's useful for. So it has Alaska, most of Canada, and Russia, just this kind of circle of land here. So if you're not near me or in those places, then it's obviously not going to be as useful, but I would highly recommend looking up regional books. And this is the other one that's really good for this area. This is Gardening Near Glaciers, and she lives here in Juneau, and she self-published this book. It's full of very useful information about gardening here, what you have to consider, how you have to modify recommendations in other gardening books to be able to garden near glaciers. So this has been really helpful to me. We have a lot of unique challenges here, but so I highly recommend getting a stack full of references for gardening, especially if you're just starting out, and the library is the perfect place to grab those if you're on a budget. So transitioning over now into my favorite books for kids, I'm going to highlight some that are good for all ages. These Julia Rothman books are gorgeous, and they're wonderful for nature study for me and my kids, but I love them as an adult just for exploring these different topics. So this is Nature Anatomy, Food Anatomy, and Farm Anatomy. I marked these for my kids. Let's see what this has. The Anatomy of a Bee, and their nectar sources. So just little blurbs of information, and then really beautiful illustrations. There's some butterfly. So when you're talking about pollinators, and just as, like I said, as a grown-up, just to be in, if you have an interest in these things. Water cycle, weather systems. So this is the nature book. The food book has everything from different types of sushi to gardening related things like spice blends from your garden, or if you buy things in bulk. Talks about different plant families like the Brassica family, and gives you a little information about how things are related to each other, which I just think is really fun. And things like how to make tofu. So these are just supplemental, but I think that they're so cool to have around to just browse through. This one is Farm Anatomy, and like, isn't that pretty? We had this in the fall. We were making corn husk dolls, and so I wanted to show them more information about specifically how corn grows and what types of corn there are, in addition to them using the corn husks. So yeah, lots of different garden veggies in this Farm Anatomy book that talks about their uses and their it has recipes even. Like this has buckwheat pancakes, and talks about, we also pulled this out to talk about the difference between barley and buckwheat and wheat and different cereal grains, and be able to identify them. We used this, here's herbs. We use this to help us discuss cotton. I bought some cotton balls, B-O-L-L-S, the actual plant with the cotton inside. And we talked about picking cotton and how difficult it was, and that, of course, led us to a history lesson. And I just love how beautiful things like this can lead you to a multidisciplinary talk with your kids, and just as an adult, lead you to, explore new ideas. So I love these books by Julia Rothman. All right, now transitioning over to children's books. If that's why you're here and you clicked on this link from another YouTuber that talks about homeschooling or gardening, thank you and welcome. I have 4 children, and they are 6, 9, 11, and 13. And the 9-year-old was the one sitting on my lap, and I homeschool them, and have almost exclusively all the way up homeschooled them. So my older 2 are in middle school this next coming year, and we love nature study, and we are Charlotte Mason homeschoolers, if you're familiar with different homeschooling methods, and nature study is a big part of our science curriculum. And so I have a lot of books about gardening and botany, but I just wanted to show you a few that I feel like really have captured our imagination and gotten my children interested in gardening with me here in our home, and also just get them excited for when we do study nature topics. Starting from the very youngest ages, I have some of my favorite books about gardening and flowers specifically. This one is so much fun, this pop-up garden book. It's an Usborne book. If it's out of stock now, check used. I got this one at a thrift store, but it's just so engaging for little ones. It talks about what's going on in a garden, and then it has these beautiful pop-ups where they can just find different things like the bees and the flowers. Shows a little 3-dimensional garden, a little pond with koi. So this one has been a favorite of all of mine. Well, my 2 younger ones at least, who were born most recently, obviously. So this is a really cute book that I love for getting the littlest ones engaged in gardening. And then moving up, this one's also from Usborne, How Flowers Grow. And it is more scientific, but it has very short little blurbs on each page about the plant parts, how they make food through photosynthesis, how they grow from bud to flower, how the pollen works. Here's some wild roses, which we have in our yard. So I love that it shows you, and we just talked about this morning again for the kids because they were commenting on how many bees are on our clover right now. And I was saying, oh, have you noticed that they're on the roses too? And there are perfect little petals for these bees to land on. And they land on the pink rose, which has gotten their attention, signal to them that it's a flower. And they get the pollen, and they drink the nectar, and the pollen sticks to their body. And then it flies to another one, and it lands and deposits the pollen. And then after the petals are gone, and the plant is starting to get ready to move on to its next stage, it creates a rose hip. And if we didn't have bees, we wouldn't have rose hips. So I like how this just kind of systematically walks you through it, but not without a whole lot of text. Normally I like books that teach through story more than I like books that teach just through facts, but there's so many good photos and diagrams in this one that it has been a favorite of mine. And then this is one that teaches more in storytelling narrative. What's called The Reason for a Flower by Ruth Heller. And it just has few words as well on each page, but you get through it a lot faster because it's more like a story or a poem. Birds and Bees. And these beautiful. And these sip nectar from the flowers. So it's like a poem with these beautiful illustrations, and but it still teaches you very interesting things like seeds travel far and wide. Some even like to hitch a ride upon a bike or a shoe. Squirrels hide them and forget that they do. Some have burrs that stick to furs and travel at a gallop. So anyway, I love this book. It's very sweet, very informative, and just beautiful. So that's another one for littles. And then I can't leave out for very little ones Peter Rabbit, because Beatrix Potter has just the most gorgeous illustrations and cutest ways of relating information that's actually informative in a by-the-way kind of sense, when Peter and Benjamin Bunny get into trouble with the cat, and they hide in a watering can, and they get wet on the bottom of their fur, and then they hide in a basket, and the cat sits on the basket and holds them in, and then Father walks along with a switch and attacks the cat, and they just remember all these little creatures walking through their garden, Mr. McGregor's garden, as if they were walking through our garden, and I think it makes them feel an affinity for the outside world and the little animals that are in it, and helps them to see them as people in a way, And obviously we're giving them human attributes that they don't have, and they're wearing clothes and stuff, but I still feel like this is one of the best books for getting them interested in what's happening in a garden and making them feel at home in a garden. Alright, I want to show you some of my favorite picture books, and then coloring books, and then chapter books. So just a few of each to give you an idea of some tools that you can research for your kiddos. I think even just going to the library and going for a book that has flowers on it is a great way to find some gems. These are the ones that have been tried and true for our family. So I mentioned that I like to teach through story, and I do the same thing with history. I enjoy reading biographies to my children. So this is A Weed is a Flower, and it is a biography of George Washington Carver, and the illustrations are by Aliki, who I just love the illustration. I love Aliki's style. I have a lot of books illustrated by Aliki, and it's written also by Aliki, and it goes through George Washington Carver's life and his interests as a child, and then how he transformed the world of farming and just cultivation by introducing peanuts, and how he really had to fight against the oppression of Black people during his time to become a professor and to make these contributions, and how it does have the bent of this particular story talks about how he's one of the greatest scientists in history, and how he's contributed tangibly to African American culture, but also to the whole world. And I just love how positive it is and how beautiful it is, and that they get to learn about the life of a scientist. So we also love this book about Karl Linnaeus, who came up with the standardized scientific naming system to categorize plants and animals, and that we all still use today, although we've of course added to it since his time, and about how he was just a curious boy who spent more time studying certain things than his parents would have wanted him to, and became interested in plants especially. And it talks about how at the time everyone named things whatever they wanted to by region, and it often had to do with what the plant did. So in this picture they're all arguing about whether it's called a dandelion, a swine snout, a yellow daisy, or a blowball, and they all have these different names. And sometimes it had to do with snake root, for instance, the names alluded to their medicinal properties. And he wanted a system, and he decided to have a Latin naming system, and it took a long time for it to get traction. And it talks all about the way he came up with these different categories and how he contributed to science throughout his life by naming he had a goal to name everything, how he was knighted, and then the sweet story of the ending of his life, and it has lots of quotes from him in it. And this was a great gem that we found just this year. And then another that's just a fun picture book. If you haven't read this before, please go read it. It's one of my favorites. Miss Rumphius by Barbara Cooney is the story of a sweet lady who's older lady, and she's fiction, so it's nice to have a single older lady who gets older and older in the story as a role model for them. She plants lupine seeds everywhere she goes to bring happiness, and it's just such a sweet story with such sweet illustrations. So that's another one that I recommend. And while we're learning about flowers, plants, gardens, I like to give them something to do with their hands, especially for reading a chapter book. Sometimes it's nature journaling, sometimes we're actually outside. But one of the things I enjoy are coloring books. And so here are a few that I really like. This is the Usborne Flowers to Color, and then these are from Dover. Herbs coloring book and Medicinal Plants coloring book. So just see what you can find. The Dover book coloring books are fairly inexpensive, and I'll show you the illustrations. I love that this one from Usborne, it has the colored photo for them to see, and then the blank one so that they can transfer the colors, but it also gives scientific facts about each flower. So this one isn't colored because what I did was copy them for my kids. We set this in the middle of the table, and I gave them each a blank one. And that's how they have colored these. And I think there's 3 or 4 of these. And then I'll show you the illustrations in the Dover books are just scientifically accurate, and I really appreciate that. So they can observe something outside or read about it and then color it. And it does have some panels of color to show you what they're supposed to look like inside and out. And this one with the Medicinal Plants coloring book is similar. Has scientific information at the bottom, and it does have charts for what they're supposed to look like inside. So I love those. I know it's kind of a stretch to call them books, but we do use them as books because they have that text that's helpful. And then just a couple before I go of chapter books that this one's probably already familiar to you. The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett is about a girl who is orphaned, goes to live with relatives, and they have a secret garden, and she meets friends, and they decide to reinvigorate this garden. And it's just a sweet story of a girl's personality growing and changing along with this garden and how it affects her whole family and friends. And this one is quite similar, but you may be less familiar with it. This is Mandy by Julie Edwards. That's Julie Andrews Edwards, so like Sound of Music, you know, Mary Poppins, Julie Andrews. And she has written a book about a little girl named Mandy, who's also an orphan. It's not a copy book, I promise. It's not copied, but it does have a lot of similarities. But she's living in an orphanage. There's a few illustrations in here. And she also finds a secret garden, but it's around a secret little cabin that she finds, and she wants to keep it to herself. And she starts planting seeds and doing some gardening and making this little abandoned cabin her own. And it's a fun story of kind of the ramifications of what can happen when younger children try to go off and do something that's more adult on their own. And it has really great lessons about honesty, about friendship, about responsibility, but also it's not a big admonishment of like, how dare you go and explore, little kids. It's like equal parts exciting and look at these new things she's learning and teaching herself. And also you could avoid a lot of trouble by getting trusted adults to help you with certain things. So I just loved it so much. I loved it, and I read it to my daughter, and then she read it herself several times.
I was this close, and then I was like, oh no!
Photo bomber! That was Elizabeth from A Suitcase Full of Books. Check out her channel. I'll leave it in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I would love to know your favorite books about gardening or botany. Please leave comments, whether you have recommendations for me or for my kiddos or something we can read together. I especially would love to have some recommendations for novels where gardening or botany or even farming are a central theme, where they really go into detail. I love learning new things through novels, so definitely let me know if you have any recommendations, and I hope that you have a wonderful end of summer and that you get lots of gardening done.
I know where I'm going, and I know who's gone with me. I know who I love, and my dear knows who I'll marry.
I'm really happy to be on a YouTube video because, like, seriously, I don't know. I want to become a YouTuber when I'm a grown-up, so.
Best thing ever.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I love you.
I'll be in another YouTube video with my mom soon, but.
Probably.